Hey, it's me Solo. We're going to do a quick rundown of patch 14.3. There's a lot of small changes in here, so we'll just make it really quick. First of all, starting with Aurelian Soul, for the most part, they just want to change him to be a little bit more proactive, and they want him to focus more on using his Q and flying around. So expect to see a lot more of a flying dragon shooting stars at your face than the one that you've seen before, which is just dropping his E and kind of stacking up his stacks and waiting for late game that way. Next, we have Azir. He gets a super small base health nerf just because, or base health regen, because fleet footwork is so good on him. It's become like the base thing that they just want to knock him down a peg a little bit. Very, very small. Brand getting his clear speed reduced and a little bit of his damage. He's probably been one of the fastest junglers in the game so far, and it's become a real problem because he gets to his first item and then he's just nuking people with all of his spells. So small clear nerf, hopefully puts him in a better spot. Corki is next. They're nerfing package because basically the whole identity of Corki is getting your package and just jumping over people and doing a ton of damage and making it hard for them to get drakes. Really annoying to play against, if anybody knows. So they're trying to move away from that. They might even completely remove it in the future, is something they've talked about. They've also changed Eclipse and Malignance, which were his like 3 core items along with Manamune. So you will not get the Eclipse effect just by shooting a rocket with the Malignance. So now it's a question of like what kind of build is Corki going to do, because that was his strongest 3 core. You might see, a lot of variety, a lot of different things, but kind of a solid nerf. I mean, kind of a big nerf. So we'll be interesting to see if the build progresses. But for right now, it looks like he's probably not going to get played very much, especially in pro play. Ezreal is next. They did a lot of Ezreal buffs the last 2 patches, and it's kind of caught up with them. Ezreal has been one of the best AD carries this last patch, so doing a small nerf here and there. His Q got a little bit less damage, and his ulti got a lot less damage, but he's still the same champ, and the reason he was so good is he could just completely ignore his W cooldown. You'd just be spamming WQ on people, especially if you hit the proc, and that was like his most damage. So he'll still be good, but it's a nice little adjustment. Alawi's finally getting more love. She gets her tentacle range increased. I mean, who doesn't like bigger tentacles? But for the most part, she's still gonna have a lot of the same problems. The map is just really big right now, so it's hard for her to really get her damage off. Hopefully they keep on changing her and maybe even give her like a whole new style of play in like some sort of rework. Karma is next. She gets a small damage nerf on her Mantra Q, and we'll see later on Malignance is also getting nerfed, so she's gonna just be like a lot less strong in those sort of like late game scenarios where she could spam her Q non-stop. Hopefully kind of like limits her from being able to be played in like every role. I think she's obviously still one of the best mid laners. She can even play top, but hopefully this puts her like more towards support and more of like the early game instead of being able to just be relevant the whole entire match. Lilia, the deer, gets a much deserved nerf. A lot of damage off of her Q, and especially since that is her main ability to do damage and ramp up, it's going to be fairly big. I think it's mostly to do with her later on in the game, especially like 1 or 2 items. The champ's still going to be good and still going to be played, but hopefully this slows her down from being like kind of the 1v9 carry that she can be sometimes. Maokai got a huge amount of changes. I can't even show them all on screen. A lot of stuff going down. They really just want to move away from him being like sapling, like perma using saplings as support, and being able to get like good base health healing. So, I think he'll still be a good support. He's the best support in the game right now. But at least now they're making it so that top lane's a little bit better. They want to make jungle a little bit better. I think he's still the same champ. I mean, having a point and click route and having such a good like team fight ultimate, having free vision, these are all just really insane things. So not really that big of a change, but it's good to know that they're like thinking about Maokai and they're not just nerfing him. They want him to play top lane again. And as top laner, like I used to play Maokai a lot, so it'd be cool to see him return. Nidalee getting a little bit of love. These are really small changes. They don't really want to go crazy on her because she's, can be such a terror. Basically just getting a little bit more tanky and getting a little bit more, sustain and a little bit more sustained damage on her E attack speed, but nothing really too nuts. Pyke, surprising to me, is getting a lot of buffs. They're buffing his armor. He already has, I think, the highest base armor in the game. So buffing it even more, buffing his Q ratio, buffing his E ratio, or sorry, the E flat damage, and then buffing his W to give him a little bit more movement speed. It's kind of just 3 buffs across the board. It's kind of crazy that they're doing this. I feel like he was already in a good spot. So, you know, if you're like a Pike one trick, you're probably going to smurf the next patch cycle. I think this champ's going to be insane. He was already at the point where if he got ahead, he would solo like 80 carries. He could even solo like some mid laners. I think it's going to be nuts, and I think he'll probably be one of the best supports in solo queue. Rengar, much deserved nerf. Very small. The health is only going to be really relevant for top lane Rengar. And then the damage for Q is pretty much based on like later on in the game. Now, Propane Hydra also got nerfed. So it is kind of like double dipping as far as like double nerf, you know, item plus champion. So hopefully it puts him in a better spot. I mean, if you've seen my clip of Rengar one-shotting almost a whole entire team with Profane Hydra, you know this champ is pretty nuts. So, you know, we'll see. I mean, still one of the best solo carry champs. And I think this isn't really going to change him that much, but it's good to get like a little bit of touch here and there. All right, apparently Shaco has been a really good support champ, and this is what they're doing with him. They basically just want to make it so you can't repeatedly use E in lane as support. I didn't even know this was a problem, but apparently it is. They're also making his W, his Jack in the Box, a little bit better for clearing, you know, grubs and even just general camps. I think this is more of like a buff towards AP Shaco, but I mean, Shaco's going to do whatever he's going to do. I think this is pretty whatever and negligent for even jungle. Shyvana getting a couple buffs. Since they removed the Night Harvester item, she's been like a lot worse as AP. So I think they're just trying to give a little bit of love towards that play style. They made Twin Bite have a little bit better AP scaling. They gave it a little bit of attack speed. Burnout also just scales a little bit more off of AP as far as the bonus movement speed goes. So, you know, kind of whatever buffs, but, you know, it's fun that they think that AP Shyvana is a fun play style and they recognize the fan base and they want to keep on like making that possible. Okay, some fairly big Talia buffs. I mean, her biggest problem is her early game is kind of poor. So they've, you know, buffed her Q a little bit early, especially in the beginning levels, the 1 through 3. And it's also like really spammable ability. So even something that's like a 6 or 8 damage buff, you know, you're going to get that off multiple times, same time skirmishes in lane. And they've also made her E just 14 seconds flat at all ranks. So a little bit more uptime when you're dealing with like assassins and, you know, movements, you know, spells or movement champions, which is like generally her weakness. So can make it a little bit better for her. She might be okay now. Teemo just got a small quality of life. Basically, if you blind somebody and their auto attack is in the air, it will actually stop the auto attack. Trundle, on paper, kind of small nerf. I mean, you know, it's like 30 health, you know, bonus attack damage. It's just 10, you know, not a big deal. But this champ is basically only auto attacks when he kills you. So the fact that you're going to have 10 less AD, you know, think of like the level 1 and 2 where Trundle's probably going to get the most value from this. Having like a long sword, less gold on your ability is kind of a big deal. So I honestly think he was already falling off because it was getting harder and harder to get solo kills because people expected you to go for them as Trundle. I think this will be like bordering on this champ just not being very playable, especially like high elo where people aren't going to die to you. So kind of a massive nerf in my opinion. Twitch got a quality of life change. Basically, you just have more room to use your Contaminate, which is the E ability that kind of like soaks in all the damage from the poison. It's very small. Wukong got like a very strange buff. So his Q, his staff ability, has always had like a large range on it, but you usually had to get to max level to really feel the benefits. But now they're starting out with 135 max range, like Q range, which is quite large. I mean, it's basically double the attack range of a lot of champs. So it's like he can maybe be some like weird hybrid, like almost like Poppy, where she's like a mid-range champ, can get her damage off without even trading autos. I don't know. Maybe there's a world where some weird like grasp build, like pseudo poke Wukong becomes a thing. He's still hurting a lot because Sheen is such an expensive item, so maybe when they nerf that and bring it down to 900, or they buff it rather. But for the most part, it's a pretty small nerf, or pretty small buff. I don't think this is going to change him that much. His biggest problem is just like he needs a lot of all-in potential, and I don't think these buffs are going to be enough for that. All right, Yorick, probably the biggest thing on this patch, Yorick getting changed. So like there's so much going on. I think the reason they're doing all this is before and right now, Yorick's only really play pattern was to build lethality, and then you would use your ghouls to kind of like chunk the opponent and borderline one-shot them sometimes, depending on how far you were ahead. So they want him to be like a bruiser, get into the fight, can like actually tank, because they feel like that's a much healthier playstyle. So what you're seeing now is you're gonna have your passive with these like your pets. They're gonna follow you more, and they're gonna get movement speed when they get away from you, which is really nice for lane because sometimes they would go really far and then get killed, or your maiden wouldn't get killed. So them being a better leash is good. The biggest thing is the Q has percent missing health when you use it instead of the flat based health that you would get, which can be really big for later on in the game. And especially if you build Sundered Sky, which is getting a little bit of a change that we'll talk about later. Just imagine being able to get a lot of CDR, spamming Q on a target. I feel like this champ's going to be like kind of unkillable. I can see a lot of matchups where you could just permanently, spam Q and just kind of be hard to kill, especially in like a 1v1 scenario. So I'm really excited to play it. I'm going to try to play it and try the new builds. Morning Mist got a little cast time change, so it's just going to be like a little easier to land. And then the R is just going to have a little bit, better attack against monsters for the most part. Okay, for everyone who hates Zeri, including myself, then you're going to be really upset about this because there's a really good chance that Zeri's going to get into pro play based off these buffs. Things like base AD and ultimate cooldown are some of the biggest things for competitive, just because like flat stats, especially early, kind of dictate level 1 and push and how the lane's going to go. And then having ultimates up all the time means that she can just constantly fight. Especially before like 11 and 16, which are very, very far for AD carries, it was very easy to bait Zeri ulti and then like start an objective because it was such a long cooldown. But now that she has Hexplate, she has 20 seconds less off her cooldown. It's going to be a lot easier to trade ultimates with champions. And I think that Zeri will actually get played a lot because, the build and the style of play right now, I think is really good for her. I think that there will be a really good chance it gets played in competitive, which is going to be frustrating, but there'll be a lot more pentakills at least. All right, Zig's getting a little bit of armor. I guess his assassin matchups are really bad. So if you're sucking against playing against Zed and Kiana, then this is going to be really helpful. Satchel charge as well. Got like a big 4-second cooldown at level 1, which is nice because most people start Satchel level 1 to just kind of get mana flow, and it's one of your easiest abilities to land. So having that up, more often is going to be really nice. Okay, Zyra, just getting some mana cost stuff. I think that they just want her to like be able to use her spells more often, especially in lane. Maybe even people will play her in jungle. I don't know, because that was like a small thing. But it's just small buff. I mean, if you like Zyra, then you'll be able to use your abilities more, and that's basically what we get here. Okay, now we get on to the items. Honestly, the item changes are pretty like whatever. I think that if you are building an item and you like the item and you like the build path, I don't think any of these changes are really going to affect you, except for one, which we'll get to in a second. So Reaver 5 AD doesn't matter. Rage Blade, 5 AD AP build path's a little different, doesn't matter. Hold Breaker, just a bug fix, really doesn't matter. This item's already not that good. Rooker going to be still the best magic resist item in the game, just because how good the shield is, regardless if it's like 2% less in this case. Rod of Ages getting 50 health, 100 mana, very, very small. This type of things don't really matter. Collector getting 5 less AD. And Youmuu's getting a small nerf to the movement speed. I think this is mostly to deal with champs like Jhin and Jace. A lot of ranged champions have built this item, and it's problematic because they can just escape you, which is really annoying. So then the same thing goes down for the AP items. You know, a little bit of a buff for the Seraph's Embrace. A little bit of a change for Echoes, just a little bit more healing. Alternator is going to be worse later on and slightly better, like really, really early. Protobelt's kind of getting a big nerf on the active, but the thing is that the active damage is kind of just a bonus. Everybody who builds this item, like Kennen and Nico, basically just build it for the effect, being able to get closer. Kraken, kind of a nice buff. Just getting able to do more damage early. I think actually one of the better buffs, because before you would have to wait to really make Kraken valuable until you had stats. But this will make it a little bit better earlier. So I think this actually helped a lot of AD carries who have struggled right now to, you know, find a first item and get into a power spike before they get into like multiple crit items. Lich Bane is small nerf. Just I think this is mostly for like champions that are building it first, where the base AD is going to be like a lot more relevant. But it still has the percent AP the same. So when you get into like a third or fourth item, this item's still going to pop off. Companion, you know, small change here or there. Pretty much the same item. Malignance, very much the same item. It's going to be a little bit better early, but it's going to be worse later on. Okay, the only item that's really a big change for me, and only on really one champion, and maybe it's just because I play Aatrox, but they're changing Profane Hydra a little bit. Before it had the big cleave when they were below 50% HP, it did a ton of damage. They're nerfing that by 20% total AD. So, you know, will a champ like Aatrox still build this? I don't know, because he has a competitive build with Sundered Sky that's also very good. Hard to say. It's kind of a preference. If you want to go lethality, this is definitely still the build, but it is not so much the best thing yet. Or still, I think he might, Sundered Sky might be better at this point. We'll see though. Static Shiv, I mean, they've changed and nerfed this item so much. Every time I see it, I don't really know what to expect. I'm sure this is probably one of the bigger nerfs, making the electroshock damage a 90 at flat, which is just a nerf overall. I think, you know, I hate this item. I hated that it was meta for so long, so I'm glad that they're just going to kind of like set the bar here. Hopefully we won't see it very often. Stormrazor got a little bit of a buff. I'm surprised they did this because Stormrazor plus Cyclosword on some range champs like Akshan and Quinn and Vayne was a really big combo, and adding a little bit more AD and a little bit more movement speed. Actually surprised that they did this, because I thought that combination of two items was a huge power spike. So it'll be interesting to see how much better those champs are just based off this. Storm Surge, this item's been changed a little bit. I think they're just trying to, you know, keep it as consistent as possible. This is going to be worse later on, but it will be a little bit better if you build a first item, which is nice. And then Sundered Sky, 10 less AD for 150 health is kind of an even trade. It's kind of depends on what you're looking for. I think for an item like this, which is mostly built by bruisers who have such good base damage, I think the health actually might be better. It makes you a little bit tankier, and you'll get more from the effect. So we'll see. But I think for people who like this item, like Lee Sin, like Aatrox, any type of bruisers like Renekton, they'll still build this item even with the difference in stat change. And then we have Titanic Hydra. You're just getting a small nerf to the active. Shouldn't really do that big a deal. I think the active was doing a ton of damage before. So just trying to reel it in a little bit. And lastly, we have Rift Herald changes. So Shelly has been a bit hard to drive for newer players and people who are unfamiliar with the mechanics. So they're just going to make it a little bit easier to drive and a little less punishing. If you run into a wall, it won't take nearly as much damage. And apparently you have like much more freedom of movement in the first few seconds. So those are all the changes. Kind of just another small like tweaking patch. Nothing super big. It'll be interesting to see if Yorick is good. You can watch me play it on my stream once the patch is out, which will be fun. And I'm excited to see. I think the balance team has been extremely good this patch, or this new season. I like the changes they've made. I like the items they made. I think the game is really, really fun right now. And I'm excited. I think I'm excited to get everything settled so they can actually like change champions. because I want to have a shakeup in the meta at some point, especially in top lane. That'll be really interesting. But for the most part, really, really fun. And thank you for watching. I mean, that's going to be it for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like and subscribe and check me out on my Twitch channel.